All right, I'm going to get started, and I think we might have a few more people join us. Thank you for joining us today in talking about Meet the Lab, which is our PBS Wisconsin Education new STEAM content for middle school students. I'd love to hear in the chat if you teach middle school, what grade levels you teach, and if you're teaching virtual or in person while we get started here. I'm going to share my screen to get us started. So as I said, Meet the Lab is our brand new content from PBS Wisconsin Education, and it's geared towards middle school students in helping them think about how they might relate to or be scientists themselves. It was funded by the Timothy William Trout Education Fund, Focus Fund for Education, and Friends of PBS Wisconsin, and really is a partnership between the Morgridge Institute for Research here at UW-Madison, WARF, and WID, which have been our partners in putting together this content, especially the science aspects of the content. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to briefly talk to you about what Meet the Lab is and the learning goals and how it relates to the NGSS standards. You're going to get a sneak peek of a piece that hasn't been released yet. It'll actually be released this spring and has some guiding discussion questions for small group discussion. We'll do one of the activities that you can easily put into your virtual or live class tomorrow or next Monday. And then we'll think about what kind of teacher science superpowers you have in another little activity. And we'll conclude by some opportunities that you and your students might take advantage of after we meet today. So to start, I'm going to show you how you'll access Meet the Lab content. If you're not already familiar with our homepage at PBS Wisconsin Education, you'll notice, first of all, if you're fans of ours, that we've had a redesign of our website, and it makes it a little bit easier to access some of our content. If you scroll down, and feel free to kind of follow along or play along on the website yourself. We will actually be using it as we go through. So this is at pbswisconsineducation.org. And when you go down, you'll see the content Meet the Lab. You can also just access it by the same part of the website / Meet the Lab as well. So like I said, Meet the Lab is a collection of education resources for middle school students, and it's meant to connect students to the type of research that's happening in labs in UW-Madison and across the state. So the learning goals are to help students make connections between the kind of research that happens in a lab that they might think, what is that? It seems like this black box, we don't know what's going on, and why it matters in real life. So how it applies to something that they might be familiar with. Helps middle school students apply or think about those scientific practices that researchers use. So some of those NGSS standards that they are using in labs that students might also be using in the classroom. There are activities where they actually can apply those same practices. And then finally, one of our huge goals of Meet the Lab is for students to think about their own strengths in science and see themselves as having things in common with people that are doing research in the lab. As I said, this is a partnership, not only with the WID, but also we worked with teachers and students across the state to make some of the resources and videos in this piece. So far, we have 2 labs, the optical microscopy and medicine lab and the tiny earth lab that we have resources for. I'm going to look at this first one, the optical microscopy. And each lab has a little introduction about what the lab does. So this lab uses lasers to research cancer. Lasers are always great to get students' attention. And each piece has first a video that shows somebody that's been affected by the kind of research that happens in the lab. So this one is a story of Kat, a student in high school whose father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when she was in middle school. And she actually got interested in science herself and started working with some of the labs to think about how she might herself become a scientist in her future. The second part actually has two parts. The first part is where students from middle schools across Wisconsin ask questions to the researchers about what they actually do in the lab. I'm going to play just a very little clip so you can get an idea of what this one looks like.
I was wondering, what type of research do you exactly do at the lab?
My lab is an imaging lab, so we use light and microscopes to try to understand cells and diseases in humans. We like to do both biology and engineering, so it's kind of a fun bridge between two disciplines. One of the main goals of this lab is to try and get a better understanding of how medicines help cancer. And so part of that is getting samples, treating them with different medicines, and seeing what's working.
I'm giving you only a little taste because we're going to come back to some of these as we go through. The next part is an activity that we'll go through in about 20 minutes. And a Meet the Scientist activity where students get to know the scientists that work in that lab. So the first thing we're going to do is look at a video that hasn't been released yet. And this is one of those Why Research Matters videos, and it's called Miranda Story. And we're actually going to break out into smaller groups to watch the video and then answer these two discussion questions, which I'll post in the chat so that you can access them in your groups. So Miranda's story is about 7.5 minutes long. I'll share the link to that so that you can watch it on your own in the small groups. We found that that's just the better way to do it than watch it all together. And then I will share as well these discussion questions. My colleague Alyssa is going to put us into groups, and I'm going to share this link. I hope you'll enjoy this video as much as I do. It hasn't been released yet, and I've been thinking about it since I watched it. Here's the link to the video. Is anybody done watching? Are you still watching? Sorry, I was watching it again and just getting mesmerized by it. And we're really excited for this one to come out. I've shared a couple questions, which right now are draft questions that we're imagining that students that'll kind of live on the website next to Miranda's story. And I'll share those with you. So maybe we can discuss them a little bit and see if they seem like helpful questions. Miranda's respect for her physical therapist inspired her to pursue a career in science. What interactions have you had with people in science careers? What did they do? And how have they influenced you? And then the second question is, Miranda's damaged central nervous system cells in her spine did not regenerate. New research uses stem cells to form many different types of new cells, which could repair central nervous system injuries and much more. What other types of issues do you think stem cell research could help with? I'd love to hear your thoughts on those, whether we can just discuss them as is, or your thoughts on the questions and Miranda's story.
Well, I would think in this past year, with what students will have seen and faced, the idea of science and medicine is going to be very important and very relevant. So I think even if it's not necessarily a healthcare worker, just knowing about all the science that is done and what's happened with, biotech engineering, I think that's going to bring a lot of discussion forward.
Absolutely, Roxanne. And I hadn't even, that seems like such a wonderful point. And I hadn't even thought about that. Like right now, every day, I'm reading like, oh, there's maybe this vaccine and this. And so we're thinking about it every day.
I think her story is really going to resonate with the students. I think they're going to be able to relate to her and think about issues, struggles that they or their family might be going through that might encourage them to, follow the same career path that she did. So, I mean, that might also be a question, thinking about that.
That's a really good, so kind of a, how does this relate to your own experience? Thanks, Deb, that's really helpful.
I was just going to chime in and say something similar. I'm actually not in education now. In a former life, I was. I'm in this session because I work at the university and I work with innovators in two of these in the labs that are featured. And so I thought it would be interesting to get some ideas for how you're sharing of their stories, because I do somewhat of the same thing. But yeah, I think that letting people relate to their own experience is a really great engagement technique. I think that you know, just even an open-ended question, something around, you know, was there anything in Miranda's story that reminded you of something you or a family member or a friend has gone through, could open up a discussion.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Does this question about does this too fast? Does this question about stem cells, is that something that you think middle school students, like with no other information, would be able to think about, or is that with just this video, is it enough to answer?
I would say no. We do in middle school talk a little bit about stem cells, so depending on the timing, if this video could be applicable to the high school too, to be honest with you, and they would be able to easily, you know, relate and understand the stem cells. So
thank you. Isn't Miranda, like, I just want to hug her. I love that video. So inspiring. Hello again. I hope everybody enjoyed watching Miranda's story. Such an inspiration. And I think we have on our website, there are 2 other stories from people that have been affected by research like this that check out on your own time. They're both fantastic stories and similar, all 3 of them were infected by what kind of the research that happened and then have said, oh, I could do that as a career. And so I think that's really a great story as well. The next part of Meet the Lab that I'd like to share is the activity. And the activity, what's so great right now is not only can it be done, it can be done in person, but it can also be done virtually. And for this one, I'm going to ask you to go to this website. If Muna, could you share this link, hopefully in the website, or excuse me, in the chat? We're going to go to the optical microscopy and medicine lab and scroll down to where it says patterns in cancer cells. The first thing that I would like you to do is there's a patterns data sheet right here that you can click on. And when you get there, you'll find this data sheet where students can actually type in their information. So I can put in my name, and this is a fillable sheet that they can use along with the activity. In a minute, I'm going to have you go back into those rooms and actually work on this activity, which is the "Can you help me find patterns in cancer cells" activity. There will be a person in your small group to help you go through basically slides 1 through 11 as a group and fill in your chart, acting as if you are the student kind of exploring this activity. So we'll take a little bit of time for that. Alyssa, if we can go back into our groups. Excellent. Did everybody get access to the data sheet? Great. All right, I'm going to share my screen again and actually do the go through the activity like this. So each of the labs will have this activity, and what it's supposed to center on are some practices that happen in the lab that also are practices tied to the NGSS standards. So we'll go through it as if we were a class going through it, and please fill out your name on the top. Don't forget your name and the date, and we'll go through your lab sheet. So students can access this. It's actually made through Google Slides. There's also a way that you can open it in Google Slides or download the PowerPoint if that's easier for your classroom. But this is Amani, and Amani is one of the scientists that works in this lab. She helped us quite a bit create all of this content and the videos. She's been great. So she introduces herself. Hi, I'm Amani, one of the scientists in the optical microscopy and medicine lab. We research ways to fight cancer. Let's look for patterns in cells to help identify new treatments for cancer. Here are 3 questions to think about. Try to think of an answer as you read each one. What patterns do scientists look for in cells in cancer research? How do these patterns help us identify cells with cancer? And how do scientists use patterns to find treatments for cancer? Let's start by looking at some healthy pancreas cells. The pancreas is an organ located very close to your stomach that helps with digestion. One of the really cool parts about these activities is that these are images actually taken from the lab. So the scientists shared their images so that we could use them in this way. So I'm going to put anybody on the spot. Do you recognize any parts of the pancreas cells in this photograph?
So just basic nucleus, cell membrane, like that.
Great. Others? All right, we'll see what Amani says. The dark dots in the center are the nucleus. This is the control center where their DNA plan is stored. The white portions are the cytoplasm, where the cell's activities occur. So there's some vocabulary as well as some description of what's going on. Now let's compare some different types of cells from different parts of the body. So again, these are images from that lab. And this is the first question in your student data sheet. Think about these questions alone or talk with a classmate and add them to your data sheet. And I'm going to give the questions and then just give you a minute to jot down things in the data sheet. What patterns do you see in these healthy cells? What similarities or differences do you notice? Do they all have the same parts? Are they all the same size and shape? And how are they arranged? So you'll see in the data sheet, this is slide 8. And it's just asking you to describe some of the characteristics. Is this correct? Yes, this is correct. Slide 8. Some of the characteristics so that you can see the similarities and the difference and the patterns. So here's the image again. We'll just take 2 minutes to jot down some notes.
So I was able to get to it, but it came up as a PDF and said it wasn't fillable. Am I missing where it's supposed to be?
Huh, let me just put this. Did anybody else, or can anybody else fill it in?
Yeah, I get a PDF too, but I'm able to fill it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm able to fill it too.
Roxanne, I'll check that out. I'm not sure why that is. Okay, what patterns do you see in these healthy cells? This could be like between 1 and 2 or 3 and 1 or all of them.
They all seem to have a round shape and the nucleus is visible.
Great, perfect.
There seems to be some grouping, although the grouping pattern isn't identical.
Excellent.
All of them have some grouping.
I noticed some of them are pretty compact and others are stretched out. Like the number 4 and number 3 are more stretched out. Any other similarities or differences?
I mean, it does seem like the clustering is stronger in 3 and 4. There's more of a clump.
Yep. Oh. So for each one of these slides too, Amani, the scientist, then kind of asks a question, you fill it out in the sheet, and then you can go to the next slide and get what she found. So you can you can check your own work. So I noticed that all the cells have a nucleus and cytoplasm, but cells 1 and 3 look smaller and more round. Cells 2 and 4 look longer, thinner. Cells 2 are bright white. Cells 3 and 4 clump together in different patterns. And so what's cool too here, you see that these are different types of cells. So students are also seeing that kind of information. As well as attached to this activity we have an educator guide that has other answers that students might provide if somebody wanted to kind of check their thoughts with that. We'll do one more. Now that you're familiar with healthy cells, we need to be able to look at a sample to identify when a cancer is present. So this one, we have healthy cells and cancer cells. And Amani asks, what do you notice is different about the healthy pancreatic cells and from the ones with cancer? I think there's also a slot to fill this one out for this slide in the data sheet, but we'll just kind of discuss it. If anybody would like to share what they notice about the differences.
It appears that either, it's hard to see very well, but you don't have that round the cytoplasm around the nucleus. It's very misshapen. I don't know if the nucleus is out of whack or something, but you can tell a difference between the healthy and the cancer cells.
Yeah. They're more, for me, like the healthy ones are more defined. You can see the different parts more than the cancer cells.
It also seems like some of the cancer cells have a dark side and a light side.
Yeah, it does.
Middle there. And they're generally just abnormal. They're all over the map.
Excellent. And so then you again get to kind of check your answers with Amani. So she says, I noticed the healthy cells are more symmetrical, have the nucleus in the middle, and the cells with cancer look lopsided and have the nucleus and cytoplasm mainly on one side. So you kind of also checking yourself with that. I'm just going to show you a couple more. So this the activity starts off recognizing patterns like this. And I'll show you a couple more slides and what they look like. You get to see how cancer cells might look different in different parts of the body. So these in particular are breast cells and breast cells with cancer. So you can see how they're a little bit different than the pancreatic cells. And again, she talks about, I noticed that the cells with cancer form smaller, these little tight clumps, then separate themselves. At each time through this, she kind of goes through and says, jot down this in the data sheet, or you can discuss this with your class. As it continues, I just want to show you a couple more images, which are pretty cool. So one of the microscope that they use there also uses this coloring, which we'll have to return in a minute. But it continues on so that you can see these real images, and so you can see that the different colors match up to find out more about cancer. So that's just one of the activities, and we'll return to the main room.
How'd the activity go?
Good. I always get nervous about talking about science. I'm like, I don't, with all the science teachers especially.
Sounds like we're having a hard time tearing that other room away.
I know.
Here they come. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so now I have the opportunity to share with you one of my favorite aspects from the Educator Resources. And this is an activity that we actually just experimented with in our work team, and we had a lot of fun with it. And so I'm excited to share it with you and see what you think on how it might work in your classrooms. So if you visit the Educator Resources tab within Meet the Labs, that is the little tab in between the About and Labs section, and Jesse can maybe paste the direct link right in the chat. You will find both guides for the 2 labs that we're currently featuring. And today we're going to take a peek at the Tiny Earth Lab Educator Engagement Guide. So if you'll open that, you'll see it is a big guide. There's a lot there, and I'm going to zoom you right down to page 10. At the bottom of page 10, there is a sweet activity that's called Activating the Meet the Scientist cards. So it's pretty straightforward. You're going to go to one of the lab pages. In this case, they're recommending that you visit the Tiny Earth Lab again, and have your students review the trading cards. So we'll do that together in our breakout rooms. Look at the cards, talk through them, and talk about who you relate to the most and why. You might find that you relate to their superpower, or maybe the quirky middle school story that they share, and see where those discussions take you. And then you'll see in the engagement guide, there is a superpower list that's been pre-curated for you. You can choose that superpower, or maybe you have one that's not listed that you would like to share. And Jesse set up a little template so that you can make your own teacher superpower card. If you'd like to add a picture, you can, and put your name and declare your own personal superpower to one another. So I'm going to put you back in your rooms again, and I'm looking forward to seeing who you connect with, and also learning more about your superpower. And I will tell you mine as well. I'll work on my card. So here you go, back into your rooms.
I love it. Thank you all for filling those out. What I love about that list too is that I think it gives you to think about science, like all the different kind of skills and creativity and that you can bring into, and that students can recognize those words and say, oh, I never thought about that word creativity with science, or I never thought about that word with science. And then also seeing the other scientists have those words themselves. Such a fun activity. And thank you for playing and adding your images on there too. Fantastic. So we have some resilience, some creativity, flexibility, troubleshooting, advocacy. Fantastic. The last couple of things that I would like to share with you today. So those are the major parts of the Meet the Lab for each of our labs. And like I said, there'll be a new lab coming out this spring, and then hopefully another one after that. And we're just getting started with the Meet the Lab resources. But coming up this in January, something that we'd like to offer, and something that I'm really excited about, is that we've partnered up with an instrument called FoldScopes. So FoldScopes are you actually cut them out, kind of remind me of like paper dolls. So you cut out the different pieces. I think Alyssa has one that she can hold up for us to see. I don't know if you can see Alyssa's little square, but FoldScopes come like that. And what we would like to offer, and we've been working with FoldScopes to create Meet the Lab FoldScopes that will come in a little pouch. And what we'd like to do is offer classroom sets of FoldScopes for you and your students to use. We'll be hopefully sending these out in January into February. And I can provide, my colleague Muna can share the link to FoldScope itself. So it's actually a little microscope that every student in the class can either take them home with them. If you're doing virtual schooling, you can use them in the classroom and they can actually do some science with the microscopes themselves. I have an order form that my colleague Muna will also share. If you would like to have a classroom set of these, please just fill this out and we will send you the FoldScopes that you need for your students. Like I said, that'll be late January into early February when those are going out. We're very excited about doing that. So a couple things that you might do is fill out that order form if you'd like to. If you decide, or if you'd like to use Meet the Lab in your class, whether it is that you'd like to have one of us, have me come and do a Meet the Lab activity virtually with your students, or if you plan to do Meet the Lab in your classroom virtually, I would love to come observe students using it. We're still perfecting what Meet the Lab might be, and it's so valuable to watch students actually use it. So if that's of interest to you, please let us know. If you use Meet the Lab, let us know how you and your students are using it, any comments, or if you do an activity that is not one we have here with Meet the Lab, we'd love to just know about it and see it. And one more thing is, I've been in contact with the creators of FoldScopes, and they've agreed to do a webinar for us on January 14th from 4 to 5. They'll actually show some different activities you can do with FoldScopes, as well as they told me they have a new app coming out that allows for students to do kind of citizen science work with the FoldScopes and share their work and see what other students are doing with FoldScopes as well. So they'll be joining us in January. And I think, Muna, that I shared, I might have had the link there for that event as well. If not, save the date and we'll send it out after today's webinar.
The Eventbrite link is in the chat.
Thank you, Muna. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions or you'd like to activate Meet the Lab, if you'd like to have us come to your classroom as well. We're super excited to share this work with you, and we'd love to know how you're using it in your classroom. And we have a little bit of time left. If anybody would love to hear your feedback on the resources, or if you have questions about any different parts of the resources.
How many labs are you ultimately going to feature? Is it just the 2 that are on there now, or will more be added in the future?
We'll be adding more labs in the future. I believe, Ryan and Ian, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the next one is coming out this spring.
That's correct.
Ryan, could you tell a little bit about that lab?
Yeah, so it's a regenerative biology lab. So it's really talking about bioengineering and how stem cells, and how this lab, the Ashton lab, is creating, they're creating molds to build stem cells to cure neurological diseases. And so that's why we featured Miranda in that video, because she had some tissue damage on her spinal cord. So the lab's pretty interesting, and they're really focusing on the engineering aspect rather than the stem cell aspect.
Thanks, Ryan. And then after that, the plan is another lab after that, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, thank you. I really like this, and the one part that I really liked about this, I think, was the fact that there was a lot of engagement built into this. So there's a lot of observations and then discussing it and talking about it. So I know that's like one of the big things right now with just trying to, when we talk about engagement, I've been talking about active versus passive engagement, and this surely moves into that active engagement piece and getting students involved in the talk and the discussion. So I really like it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's the hope. And, I think right now, especially, right, we need these kind of things that can be done online that are also, active. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. I'll stay on here if anybody has any questions or wants to talk further about it. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.